Welcome to the second part of the Industrial Ecology Data Commons search tutorial. Here we will go into the more specific search options that you find listed here. For example, if you have a certain label, you can have a search here that gives you all datasets, or you can search for individual author or DOI related datasets. So let's go through them one by one. First, some background information. In the IEDC, data points are organized into data sets. So here, schematically, you have 6 different data sets which have a description, a name, keywords, or belong to a project or an author. That means we can do a search in the data catalog. For example, we can find all data sets of a given type, or we can find all data sets by a certain author or a certain DOI. So one search option or one group of search options addresses the individual data sets. Then you can go into the data sets, and there we have the labels for the different aspects. Material composition of trains, mining of copper, trade flows from and to Brazil, and so on. So we can look into the data sets and ask different questions. For example, what data sets are there that contain information about Brazil? What data sets are there that have a lifetime for bicycles, and so on? So this would be the search perspective on the data points in individual data sets. Now we go through 4 main search options one by one. First, the most general search options that finds all data sets with a given label. Here, we click this option and we are directed to a new page. Here we have a drop-down menu of the IEDC's most commonly used and most general classifications, the time, the regions, chemical elements, industries, products, and so on. You can select a classification here that contains the label you want to search for. So let's see, for example, what data do we have on Namibia? So we go to the regions classification, select the label, and then all data sets are returned. So here you first see we have 15 data sets, and these data sets are grouped by the data categories. So we may have flow data, stock data, material and product properties with the relation to Namibia. We may have process data, industry data, for example. We have process capacity data, general ratios, and so on. So for example, in the flow category, we have domestic extraction flows, renewable electricity generation, greenhouse gas emissions, and also final consumption. In the stock, we have also renewable energy technologies and we have population. And in the material product properties, we have Lorentz curves, intensive data. We have the share of renewable electricity and also the end use shares and so on. So you could see here, if you do a case study on a certain country, you can directly get the overview of what is contained. Chemical elements. What about cobalt? So let's have a look at cobalt. Cobalt as a chemical element has 9 datasets: end-use shares, material cycle yield parameters, mobile phone composition, for example. But cobalt can also be a material, so it's worthwhile to also check for cobalt in the material list. And here you see there's another 19 datasets. So overall, you select what you want. We can continue this forever. Commodities, for example, we can see are there information about bicycles. We have a data set on material composition and trade commodities, but bicycle can also be a product. So here we would have another 8 data sets that contains per capita stocks, lifetime, and energy intensity, material composition of bicycles, for example. So you see, you select the label from the classification that describes the aspect. Is it a commodity or a year or a region or a process? And then all data sets across the database are shown. And then, of course, once you have the data sets, you can select it there will be a preview shown, and after the preview you can go to direct download or to the filter page as demonstrated in the other tutorial. So this was the first search option. Now we look into data sets by a given main aspect. We go back to our main data page and the overview. So if you want to search for a main aspect, you have an option that makes the search a bit more targeted. What does it mean, main aspect? Well, if you think of flow data are typically for materials or for products. Lifetime data are typically for products. Material composition can be searched either by material or by the product the material is in. So each data type typically has one main aspect that is really needed or this characterizes the data type. And here you see what data are there, how many, which data type and how many. For example, we currently have 2,500 entries for lifetime by commodity. If you click on them, the whole list is shown. So we would have live data for air coolers, for example, 2 data sets here. We would have lifetime data for fridges, 3 data sets that contain this information. Lifetime data for packaging cans, 2 data sets, and so on. Or you go for flows of commodities, population by country, material composition. We would have material composition data. These are all the trade codes for which we have some, but we have, for example, material composition of single family houses. And totally, there is more than 5 data sets here. And then again, once you have the search, you select the data type that you want, you select the label, and you get the data sets that contain this information. You can browse them by clicking on them. So you see the data set is shown here, selected values, the description is also here, the sources and so on, and you can download it. Or you can go to the filtering page and do further filtering. You can select another data set and do the same again. So it's easily possible to select the data type aspect combination you want. You see also roughly how many data points there are, and then you can click yourself through the label that you need. Let's say we have another example would be electricity generation solar PV. There we have one data set by Sebastian Datemann, and then again the data are shown, can be inspected and downloaded. We also have, and this is the most advanced search options, the opportunity to search for data sets by all aspects. So this means I want to refine my search further. I just don't want to have data for bicycles. I want to have data for bicycles from a certain manufacturing year. Or I don't just want to have material composition of residential buildings, but I want them in a certain region. So this is done by the search options datasets by all aspects. And it starts as the previous one, but now the main aspect isn't given. There is no main aspect, so there is simply a list of all data types we have. So let's choose material composition, and then a list of all possible aspects that are linked to material composition in the database is shown. And of course, the aspects that we are interested in would be the product type. For buildings, product type, for example, the residential building, or let's non-residential, residential building. Different ones, different options are here that can be searched from. Residential buildings, taller building. And you see there is a number of data sets, in total 8 or so, that have information about this. Now, you may want to know, well, I want to have a building from a certain region. So do you have this data here, building data for China? So we now select two data sets, two aspects, residential buildings of this particular type in China. The answer is no. There is no data for China for this particular aspect. So what about Indonesia maybe? Also not. What about, I think one of the data sets are from Norway. Exactly. So you see, for this particular building, residential building, taller building, we have a matching data set for Norway selected by this double aspect search. And then here again, you can inspect the data set and download or move to a filtering page. And this specification can be done to up to 3 aspects. So you can have up to 1 region, product type or city or year, material and product. And then the intersection of all chosen labels is then searched for. That also means that most searches will not lead to a result. So this is really only viable search options if you have a lot of results and you want to narrow them down to individual materials, products, and so on. So this is in a nutshell the dataset search by all aspects. And finally, we have the option to search the entire database for a certain author name or DOI. This is the last one, search datasets for DOI or author. So for example, we have the database from the Yale Stocks and Flows projects compiled by Rupert Myers. So we would search for those data sets and then it goes through the entire database, including the comments. That's why it takes a few seconds. And it gives you here the data sets of the Yale Stocks and Flows database, for example. You can also enter a paper DOI and the same will happen. So it's very simple. And the main feature here is it really goes through both the table of contents, the data catalog, and it searches in individual data sets. In the comment, whether there is a certain author mentioned or a certain DOI, because some of our data sets are a compilation of data from many different papers and many different authors. So here you can select them individually. So these are the advanced search options. You see they cater to different needs and are quite flexible. And if this was a bit too much, I can also recommend in the first step the simple search. You can go here and select simply a keyword or a data type, and then you can browse the data catalog. So this would be the basic step where then data groups, data sets, and maybe a system definition or other information is shown, and you can browse the data here. This particular search is covered in the first part of the tutorial. Here in the second part, we covered the advanced search options. So I hope this is helpful for you, and I wish you all the best for your research and data work, and I hope you find this database useful. Thank you.